Picture this. It's January 1st, 2020, and the future seems bright, and you're as excited as ever for your upcoming trip to France this March. You've been saving up for this trip for a really long time, and you just couldn't wait to get there and savor the delicious French food and sip on some fancy French wine. And finally, March rolls around, and what at first seemed like a big joke starts to set in as reality as shelter-at-home orders sweep the nation, and eventually you're forced to cancel your anticipated voyage. At first you're sad, but you decide not to resign yourself to those feelings, and to instead use this time productively, to get ready for when you actually can go. So you decide to start learning French. The only problem is, you don't know where to start. Well, that's why I'm here. I want to share today with you guys some knowledge that really helped me become fluent in French and Italian, but that you guys can really use to learn any language. So, let's go. Ahoy, what's up guys? Bienvenidos a mi canal, bienvenue sur ma chaîne, benvenuti al mio canale, and welcome to my channel. My name is Axel, for those of you who don't know me, and I am the Millennial Polyglot. So I know during this period of self-isolation, a lot of people might be taking this time to really focus on themselves and learn something new and improve on some element of themselves, whether that be learning a new instrument, starting to read more, or learning a new language. Well, I have a confession to make. I'm addicted to languages. And not just languages, but also their respective cultures. I don't know why, I really love getting to know as much about a language as I can before going to a respective country, just to really maximize my experience there. And I mean, let's be honest, it's always a lot easier to learn something new with some context. So I wanted to make this video to address a question that I get from a lot of friends when I tell them that I speak multiple languages, and that is, how did I do it? First of all, let me just say that from my observations, I feel like this is a very common phenomenon in the US, more than in Europe. And I only say more than Europe because that's really the only other continent that I've traveled to outside of the US and Puerto Rico. Actually, I've also been to the Dominican Republic, but still that's in the Caribbean, so that's kind of the same. But I only say that because in Europe, a lot of the countries are bordered by other countries that speak different languages, so I feel like it's a lot more accessible for them to learn other languages. Like if you look at France, Italy, and Spain, those are 3 different countries that speak 3 different languages that are relatively close to each other. If you look at the mainland United States, the continental United States is just about as big as the continent of Europe, which encapsulates so many more countries. And I really just wanted to say that to kind of illustrate my experience, because I'm speaking from my own perspective, so don't come at me. Now, as I mentioned in my last video, I am Puerto Rican, as is my whole family, and so I have the unique privilege of having been born outside of the mainland US with an American passport. So I'm a US citizen, but Spanish was my first language, and Spanish is the main language in Puerto Rico. Because I grew up speaking Spanish, I do feel like it gave me an upper hand compared to my other English-only speaking colleagues, mostly because, and I don't have the science to back this logic, to be honest with you, but I feel like it makes sense that somebody who's already had to learn another language before in their lives is probably gonna have an easier time learning another language later on down the line, because as they say, the brain is a muscle and you must exercise it as such. And yes, I know the brain isn't a muscle, it's an organ, but I digress. And this isn't to say that if you grew up only speaking one language that you aren't going to be able to learn another one, because that's simply not the case. It's just, it might make it a little bit more difficult for you to adapt to some of what I think are the most crucial aspects to learning a new language. So I wanted to touch on 5 elements that might make language learning easier for you, because after all, you don't know what you don't know. Number 1, you have to stop trying to directly translate from one language to the other in your head. Now, to really be able to learn a new language, you have to be able to let go of the language that you're learning from, which is effectively like taking off your training wheels. Thinking in one language while speaking in another is going to introduce this element of cognitive dissonance that's going to confuse you, and it's going to end up being extremely detrimental to your language learning. Common side effects might include stuttering, or wanting to backtrack in the middle of your sentence and start all over in favor for something that might seem to make more sense in your own language. A lot of times something might seem to not make sense when you're thinking about it in your language but hearing it in another one, but that's just the nature of languages. You know, like there's different grammar rules and different sentence structures that are just a couple of things that are going to make it seem a lot different than your language. So the sooner you let go of your language, the sooner you can really pick up on this new language. When you can't think of how to say what you want in the way you want to say it, try instead to think of a different way of saying what you want to say using what you already know. For example, in French, if you're trying to tell somebody, tell it to him, right? You're gonna say something like, dis-le lui, which might seem simple enough, but if you're a learner of French, then you know that that's adding some other aspects of grammar that are a little bit more intermediate than beginner. So if you're just starting off and you don't know that structure, you don't know how to express yourself in that way with like indirect object pronouns, then you can still communicate, but you're probably just gonna have to take a step back and be like, okay, what do I know? Like, I know, basic vocab. So starting out, you might not be able to say that, but you might be able to string together a sentence that might be something like, donne la pomme à lui, or donne la pomme à il, which isn't even grammatically correct, but as you'll find French people are wont to do, they will correct you if need be, and honestly, they're probably just gonna understand what you're saying anyway. So it's the effort that really counts, you know? You don't want to go to a new country and expect everybody to speak English. I mean, if you're going to a place like Paris, yeah, of course, everybody's gonna speak English, but if you put a little effort in, it's gonna go a long way. A lot of people are gonna really appreciate it. So that actually brings me to my next element. Number 2. Don't let the fear of striking out keep you from playing the game. See what I did there? I bet you like that Cinderella story reference, huh? Yes, you're going to make mistakes. It's going to happen. Who do you know that got really good at speaking a language without ever having made any mistakes? Or anybody who actually got really good at anything without ever making any mistakes? I speak fluent French and Italian, and I still make mistakes. I've been learning French for 13 years, the better part of 13 years now, and I still make mistakes. I speak really good French, but I still make mistakes, and I'm okay with that. I'm comfortable with that, because I know that I want to take every chance I get to practice, because it's only with that practice that I'm going to keep getting better. So I have to be okay with making these mistakes, because that's mostly how I'm gonna learn. It's going to happen, and if you resign yourself to that fact, it's gonna go a long way, because if you don't put yourself out there and practice speaking that language as much as you can, you're never gonna be able to put yourself in that uncomfortable experience where you're inevitably gonna learn the most from. So I don't care how good you are. Your starting point is never going to be perfect. Number 3, numéro 3, numéro 3, numéro 3. Build it into your daily life. This is what helped me the most, and it starts with little things. So take into consideration, if you're taking a class, for example, what are you learning in that class? How can you use what you're learning in your daily life? In little amounts. Maybe you're learning to tell time. So next time you look at a clock, instead of telling yourself the time in English, say it out loud in whatever language you're learning. Sont 7h30. 7h31. Or maybe next time that you're writing a grocery list, write down your groceries in that language.
Delle uova, del latte, del pane, delle mele, delle pere, delle banane, dell'acqua.
or when you're counting money. Oh la la. 1, 2, 3, 13. Oh. You might not have access to people with whom you can actually practice the language. Like, this happened to me in high school. My high school was predominantly Hispanic Latino. I already spoke Spanish, and so did everybody else, but I didn't have anybody with whom I can practice my French or Italian with. I was on my own. So I built it into my daily life to practice it as much as I could. One really important way to learn about another culture and language is by consuming different countries' art and media. If you look at their films, their television shows, news outlets, or even like trending topics on Twitter, you can go into Twitter and change the country that you're in, even the city that you're in, to see what's trending in that location. And I mean, I talk a lot about culture, but that's because I feel like a country's language is almost like reflective of their culture. Take French, for example. In a big city like Paris, they might have a tendency to mix words together, or like to shorten words and put them together. So for example, to be like, I'm here, instead of saying je suis là, they would say something more along the lines of je suis là, you know, she instead of je suis, because they have a tendency to do that. But if you go to like the south of France, in like Marseille, they would probably say je suis là, because they would probably, you know, say the whole thing. And this is kind of like a whole culture thing. Like Paris is a very busy, bustling metropolis. Everything is so fast-paced, and it's reflected in the language. You can see that in the language, you know? They make everything as short as possible and as quick as possible. In Marseille, the south of France, Nice, Cannes, I can't actually really speak to how they really speak, but they are more notoriously laid back and slower pace, and it's almost like New York compared to LA, but in a different scale. You could actually honestly even see it in the US, where in the north or in bigger cities, people tend to talk quicker, or, you know, mix words together and stuff, whereas in the south, people have more like elongated vowels and drawn out sentences, you know? It's a reflection of the culture. So along with that, what you might have heard that a lot of people tend to recommend is that you watch movies and TV shows from that country, and that absolutely is a great way. But I'm not such a huge proponent for this method for beginners, because you know what, when you're watching a film in a movie, it's different than actually hearing it in real life, you know? French in a movie is so fast and complicated a lot of times that I'm like, I have to like rewind, or I like put subtitles on. But the thing is that what people usually do is they'll watch like a French movie with English subtitles so that they could learn French, and I am kind of against that, because again, going back to what I said before when I was suggesting you stop directly translating from your language to another one in your head, is that it introduces that element of cognitive dissonance. And I feel like in this case, that element is there again. You're watching something in French and you're reading in English. So when you're listening to something in French and you're like reading in English, what do you really think you're paying more attention to? You're probably paying more attention to the subtitles. You're probably paying attention to what you're reading. Because I feel like, and again, I don't have the science to back this up, but I feel like most people are visual learners, and I feel like reading probably takes a little bit more brain power than passively listening. So a little cheat code that I did that really helped me get past that was to start watching movies that I know really well in English, but watch them dubbed in that language with closed captions in that language. So for example, I would watch The Devil Wears Prada in Italian with Italian subtitles, and I know that movie like cover to cover. Can you say that with a movie? I don't know, I don't think so, but I know that movie very well. So even if I'm watching it in Italian, I'm still listening and I know exactly what's going on because I know the movie. And if I get lost at any point, I can follow along with the subtitles underneath. So that helps me with reading in the language too. So when you do that, I feel like you're not passively listening anymore, now you're actively listening because you're following along with the subtitles in that language that you're listening to. So you're not thinking and reading in two different languages, which it's not going to go far. So that way you have the context of what they're talking about, and now you're actively listening to what they're saying. And now you have the additional benefit of being able to follow along with the subtitles when they inevitably string together 7 words into one indistinguishable phrase. Oh, French, you have made me so patient. Another thing that I really recommend is listening to music in that language. For French, I recommend classics like Edith Piaf, or Charles Aznavour. Emmenez-moi au pays des merveilles. Il me semble que la misère serait moins pénible au soleil. But in Italian, I feel like I'm more inclined to listen to like pop or like rock, like Moda. Come la notte, come le botte, come le ferite abbandonate mai curate ancora te. Or Alessandra Amoroso. Vivo ogni secondo come l'ultimo secondo. Credo in poche cose, ma ci credo fino in fondo. Amo irresponsabilmente tanto che non riesco a smettere, sinceramente. But anyway, none of this would be relevant if you're not motivated, which incidentally is the next element. Number 4, find your motivation and stick to it. So, why do you want to learn another language? No one reason is more valid than the next, but really being aware of your intentions could really go a long way. I don't know, too often do people say, I took Spanish for 8 years and I don't know a thing. And why is that, you might ask? Well, ultimately, it's because they didn't want to. One more time for the people in the back. They didn't want to. Pure and simple. If you really want to do something, you will find a way to do it. I truly and deeply believe that. And I honestly can't count my blessings enough for all of the language instructors that I've had in my life. Because honestly, I know that that could have an effect too. And I was lucky enough to have amazing language teachers that really motivated me to want to learn more too. But at the end of the day, I always had this inherent want to learn languages. And so I put myself out there, and you should too if that's what you want to do. You know, you have to take accountability. At the end of the day, you're gonna make it happen for yourself. Nobody else is gonna do that for you. Number 5, last one. Practice, practice, practice. I know it's not what you want to hear because we all want the path of least resistance. We all want that pill that when swallowed will magically make you speak fluent Mandarin. But that doesn't exist. In real life, you get out what you put in. Now at the end of the day, the best way to learn a language is probably going to be to put yourself in a situation where you can practice with native speakers, with people who actually know the language in real life. But for a lot of people, that goal is a little bit further off. So in the meantime, you guys have to get creative. You just have to get creative and work with what you've got. And now, you might just be ready for your trip to France next time, because you never know, that trip could be one that changes your life, especially now that you are a lot better at French than you were before, hopefully. So there you have it, you guys. My top 5 elements to really learn a new language. Now, it's obviously important to keep in mind that this advice is subjective, so it might be different from person to person. I'm just telling you what worked for me. Life is an ongoing journey, and so is the pursuit of a new language. You're never really done. I mean, think about it. How many times do you learn something new about your native language? Probably really often. And if you said otherwise, you're probably a genius, lying, or stagnant in your own personal development. Sorry. Now I have a couple other language learning videos in the works that I'm really excited for, but I'd like to hear from you guys. What do you guys think I should do? What do you guys want to see from me? And do you guys have any other like additional advice to the ones that I've just listed above? Because if so, I would love to see them down in the comments below. I mean, this is social media. We're all here to share our experiences and learn from one another. So just like I'm sharing this information with you guys are so welcome to share information with one another and with myself down below too. So that's it for today, guys. If you made it this far, thank you so much. Let me know down in the comments below if this advice was helpful in any way. I really hope it was. And until next time, I'm out. Thank you.